Hi friends, welcome back. It's another Tuesday and you get to spend a little bit of time with me and I get to spend a little time with you. That's my best part of Tuesdays, is time with my friends. So today I thought I'd share with you a few things that I always wish I knew when I was a beginning sewist. I'll also share with you how I got started and why I like to sew. If you want to hear about that, then you have to stick around. I'm Nye with Ellie and Mac. Come along, friends. A lot of people ask me how I got started sewing. I know that sewing is a different journey for every sewist, and so the stories can be very different for everyone. I started sewing when I was 6. I literally begged and begged and begged for a sewing kit. One of my family members got me a tiny little sewing box made out of fabric with thread and needle in it so I could learn. And then I proceeded to cut up everything in my house and make Barbie clothes with it. I also took a sheet that was my favorite sheet. It was red and it had a bunch of little flowers on it, and I made curtains. They were hideous, but nevertheless, my mom praised me for it. She was happy that I was being creative and also encouraged me to please stop cutting up everything in the house. So that was the end of my sewing and styling career at that point. After I had my first daughter, I decided that I wanted to make her some things. I don't know why. It just came out of nowhere. I just wanted to make her something. She was about 5 or 6. And I went to Walmart, I purchased some fabric, and I just started sewing. And I've been on a roll ever since. Now, I sew because I really love creating anything. I've never been able to draw or build things, and so I really felt like with sewing, it's a very tactile, creative process that gives me a result. And I like having the result of the sewing craft. That's why I still sew. It's my happy place, it's my quiet place, it's my creative space. And I love it. I also wanted to show you all my cup. I put Not Today Nancy on the front and my Ellie and Mac sewing machine on the back, because let's be real, we got time for sewing, but we ain't got time for Nancy, because Nancy is best friends with Murphy's Law, right? We all know that. We can't have that, Nancy, okay? Alright, so let's get started with all these things that I wish I knew when I started out sewing. The first thing, where to find cheap fabric. Good grief! I was going to Hobby Lobby and Joann's, and that's pretty much it. I had no idea that I could find fabric literally all around me. In my home, I had sheets that weren't being used. I had blankets that weren't being used. I had clothing that I wasn't wearing that totally could have been repurposed. I could have gone to thrift stores because I'm a thrifty girl and I love thrift stores, but it never dawned on me, hello, Goodwill. I could buy tons of sweatshirts and repurpose them, but I never thought about that. You know, clearance bins in the stores. So why was I not looking in the clearance bins? I was looking in the clearance bins to wear what they already had, but I didn't think that I could repurpose it, restyle it, and make it cute for me. There's a ton of fabric in a ton of places. Don't forget the clearance bins at your fabric stores. Don't forget to Google on the internet and see if there are any fabric stores. There are so many mom and pop fabric stores, and that's what they do, fabric. Or check your sewing shops, because places that sell sewing machines sometimes sell tons of fabric, and they're always clearancing them. And when I say clearance, I mean for real clearance, okay? Also, one more thing that I didn't know about are all these Facebook fabric groups. There are just tons and tons and tons of them, and we'll get to that another time. But yeah, you can find fabric anywhere. Number 2, I wish I knew that I needed to backstitch
everything.
I started sewing with wovens. So when I was making my woven dresses, I never understood why before I could get to a cross seam, the seams were literally coming out. And it's because I didn't know to backstitch. I actually had a friend come and tell me after a few times of seeing some of the things that I made, the issues I was having. She said, "Nye, you are not backstitching." Not backstitching was ruining my projects. Backstitch! The third thing I wish I knew is that I didn't need a machine with a ton of bells and whistles. You only need a basic machine. Unless you're going to be sewing heavy duty upholstery, y'all can get away with a basic machine that has a forward stitch, a back stitch, and a zigzag stitch. Okay, you don't need all those decorative stitches. I love beautiful stitches too, but when you're just beginning, you're not even going to use them. Why spend extra money if you don't have it for an option that you're likely not going to use right away? I literally have gotten into some of the stitches on my machine just because I wanted to make a video about it. If you can sew forward, you can sew back, and you can zigzag, you're on your way. The fourth thing, number 4. Get yourself a good iron. I went through several cheap $12 irons initially because I didn't really think an iron was a super important thing until they started spilling rusty water on my clothing, until they stopped working, until they were just not hot enough for certain fabrics that I was using, or didn't create the best steam. It's okay to invest on an iron that you are going to use for a very long time. I have a Rowenta. I believe I spent $70 on it, and I have never ever had an issue with that Rowenta iron. It gets extremely hot. It has fabulous steam. It never cries. I say cry because it looks like a rusty dirt cry all over your clothing when it leaks. It doesn't cry all over my fabric. And it's self-cleaning, so I don't have to worry about that. I also have this little guy. He's been my favorite for a little while now. This is my Panasonic cordless iron. This is very small. It takes up very little real estate on my table. So I really enjoy having that little iron. And iron is important. With wovens, it helps you get that crisp and precise sew, so your items can look glorious. And with knits, it can be really helpful to alleviate a little bit of puckering if you happen to have a little bit. You know, if you were pulling your fabric a little bit and you really shouldn't have been, the iron sometimes can get that flat for you. And iron is a very important part of sewing, even if you hate it. 5 golden, no, just kidding, 5. PDF patterns. I wish somebody had told me about PDF patterns when I first began. I did not know that I could get somebody to help me with pictures and detailed directions. If you started sewing before the invention of PDF patterns, then you understand my struggle. Pictures keep me interested and tell a story better to me than reading. So I had a very hard time using store-bought patterns because they just aren't made for the way that I learn. PDF patterns are fabulous, and they have more instruction because they include photos. So I wish someone had told me about that. Now, if you started sewing as a beginner and PDF patterns were your beginning, well then luck at you, because back in my day, no, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that to you. 6, where to find help. I wish when I was a beginning sewist, I knew where to go to find help. Sometimes you find all kinds of things on the internet, but they may not be the most reputable advice that you can find. So if I was starting to begin sewing now in the age of PDF patterns and sewing groups, I would probably be able to find the help that I need with those patterns. Go back to the PDF pattern group and ask. The admins there are trained to answer your questions, sometimes maybe not in the detail that you would like, but in a lot of cases, cases, they can help you get through a struggle that you're having. There are also groups for every sewing machine, cover, stitch that you can purchase in the store. There is somebody there that is an expert on it, and you're going to find more information there, a lot of cases, than you would find on the product page. That brings me to number 7. Know and understand your machine. You really need to read the manual for the machine that you're using. A lot of times, the mistakes that you may be having or making, it can be answered by just simply looking at the manual. The manual on a lot of sewing machines tells you how to use different types of stitches, the needles that are necessary for certain stitches, the fabrics and fabric weights that you can use those stitches with in order to be successful. Those manuals are there to help, even though they are so boring. 7. Take a break. If you're tired, take a break. Let me tell you something. Just like Cinderella turned into a pumpkin after midnight, your sleeve becomes a neck hole after midnight too. Take a break when you're tired. Nothing good and fabulous occurs when you're exhausted, okay? I had to learn that the hard way. I made pockets with no insides. I put 2 butts on my pants. Like, exhaustion will do that to your makes, okay? Just take a break. It's all right. Don't skip steps. Make sure you read your pattern all the way through before you get started. It may not seem like it's very, very important, each step that you find in your pattern, but it is. If you do not stay stitch that neckline, it's going to be all over the place, and then you're going to be like, why does my neckline look all unshapely? Well, because you skipped a step. So things like understitching, stay stitching, edge finishing, these things are very, very important to your pattern and will help you have a more finished product when you're done. So don't skip any steps. Read that whole pattern and don't skip any of those tiny little details. They're very, very important. Number 9, mistakes are part of the process. Be okay with your mistakes. Take that item, chuck it aside, learn from it, and keep it moving. If you're unsure and it's your first time making a pattern and you don't know how it's going to fit, go ahead and get some garbage fabric that you aren't in love with and make a muslin. Just make that pattern one good time so you can see where you're going to have issues with fit, and then you're off to a great start. Number 10. Ooh. Magic fingers with number 10. Okay. Number 10. Wash your doggone fabric. Naisa. Make sure that you're washing all of your fabric before you sew it. 1, because you want to make sure that your fabric is color fast before you make something out of it and then you wash it and it's ruined. 2, because a lot of fabrics shrink after you wash them. So you want to wash them. You need to make sure that you're prepping those fabrics properly before you get started with your pattern. So there you have it. 10 little things that I wish I knew when I started sewing. And I hope maybe one of those things is helpful to you. I hope maybe we can relate on some level on some of those things. I don't know. I think maybe if I could add one more thing, it would be to not hold back and sew the thing. Yes. Enjoy your day. Bye.